Hello, everyone. My name is Jose, and I work as a guide for the Central Park Conservancy. On behalf of everyone here, I'd like to welcome you all on our weekly walk. And today we're going to be exploring the Blockhouse, which is located all the way towards the north end of Central Park. We're also going to explore some of the landmarks leading up to it as well. So just a bit of a housekeeping before we get started on our weekly walk for today. All participants are muted, but of course you can also use the chat feature to say hello and comment. If you have any questions, you can try using the Q&A feature, and my colleague Ian is going to answer them as we go along. Of course, feel free to let us know in the chat where you're coming from. Now, the images that you folks are going to see today, these were taken by myself within the last week, but you're also going to see some historic images, and these were taken from the photo archives of the Library of Congress, New York Historic Society, and the New York Public Library. Now, closed captioning has also been enabled for accessibility for folks who are hard of hearing. If you're on a laptop or PC and you don't want to see the caption, simply press live transcript and then press hide subtitle. If you're on a cell phone, tablet, iPad, or other mobile device, it might get a little tricky since Zoom's interface is going to be very, very different across platforms and devices. However, you can try pressing settings on the Zoom app, then press meeting, and then toggle captioning to on or off. My colleague Ian has posted some of those directions on the chat, so please feel free to refer to those directions on the chat if you are lost. Okay, so now the Central Park Conservancy, basically we are the nonprofit that's tasked with taking care of the park, and we've been doing this since 1980. Basically, our official mission is to preserve and celebrate Central Park as a sanctuary from the pace and pressures of city life, enhancing the enjoyment and well-being of all. Okay, so before we begin, let's go and check out our route for today. Now, we're going to be making our way from the east side of the park at 106th Street and 5th Avenue, and then we're going to explore the southern shore of the Harlem Mere. We're going to walk along the northern edge of the park right by 110th Street, head up this dramatic hill into the North Woods, and then we'll end off our tour with an exploration of the Blockhouse. So we're going to start off right here at 5th Avenue, right at the heart of what's called Museum Mile. Now, as many of you folks know, this avenue is, of course, jam-packed with some of the most important cultural institutions in the country, such as the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Museum of the City of New York. So we're going to make our way through the skate, and over on our right-hand side, we pass by these steps leading down to the Harlem Mere. Now, this large body of water, which sits at roughly around 10 acres or so, this is going to be a favorite gathering spot for many here in the local Harlem community. Here we can only see just a small fraction of this lovely water, but we'll get to see more of it on our walk today. Okay, so let's actually go ahead and start off with our poll of the day. And let me go ahead and launch it right now. Okay, so right now we want to know, do you have a favorite body of water here in Central Park? And I've actually listed the major ones here on the poll, but in total, there are going to be about 7 of these main water bodies, not including streams like the Gill or the Lock. From north to south, these would be the Harlem Mere, the pool, the reservoir, Turtle Pond, the lake, conservatory water, and the pond. Of course, you might not have a favorite, so I've included that option as well. Okay, it looks like most of us have voted, so let me go ahead now and share the results. All right, and it looks like about 20% of us are big fans of the lake, followed by the reservoir, and then the pond. And a few folks, of course, also like to go and check out all the different ponds of Central Park, which of course is going to be fantastic. Now, mine happens to be the Harlem Mere, since we actually have our offices up here, and I get to look at it pretty much every day. Okay, so let's go ahead and make our way towards our next stop. And here we go. All right, so moving on, we're going to go ahead and make a right turn from the Harlem Mere and then we're going to follow the shoreline, which is basically lined with all sorts of trees, such as these black locusts. And just up ahead, we can actually see a weeping willow tree, which is one of our favorite waterside trees. Now, the way that the trees and branches kind of swoop down almost kind of remind me of a waterfall. Now, this particular one is also pretty great in a hot day like today when the sun is out in full force, as it provides some lovely shade. And in case you were wondering, yes, it is very, very, very hot in New York City right now, as well as most of the country, which is really kind of something else. Anyways, if we look over towards the left, we can actually see this flagpole placed on top of Rocky. This marks, of course, the historic site of Fort Clinton, which was a small gun battery that defended this area in the early 1800s. Today, Fort Clinton is going to be a park overlook with some really excellent views of the surrounding neighborhoods. Okay, and right now we can see some of the shoreline plantings that have been placed here by the Conservancy. So why don't we go ahead and actually take a closer look at some of these shoreline plantings. Right, and right now we can see what's called the pickerel weed, which is commonly planted along bodies of water like lakes and ponds. We also have these very deep blue flowers that some folks actually mistake for hyacinths. They're going to be an important source of food for some pollinators, including bees and butterflies. In fact, if you take a look right here, you might be able to see both a bee and a butterfly in this image, which I didn't actually pick that up when I was taking images of the pickerel weed just this week. But I'm kind of glad that they actually showed on the picture. And continuing north now, and of course we now start to see a glimpse of the Charles A. Dana Center over on the other side of the water. That's this Victorian image right over, or this Victorian structure, Victorian-looking structure over on the image. Now, the Dana Center basically serves as the main visitor center for the north end of the park. And as of last month, it's been officially reopened for visitors. Slowly but surely, of course, we are opening our facilities back up to the public. And over on our left, we see this giant rock outcrop along the south shore of the Harlem Mere. This, of course, is called Manhattan Schist, and it's really very pronounced the further north you head up the island. You can find Manhattan Schist all over the park, and they create some really lovely rolling hills, and they provide some very, very dramatic views of the area. And in order to access some of these hills, you're going to need to head up a few steps. Now, because of the very rocky topography on this side of Central Park, staircases are such a common sight here in the north. So let's go ahead and keep following the pathway towards the next stop. We're going to head up these steps. And after winding through some of the hills, you come to the former site of Nutter's Battery. Just like the hill where Fort Clinton was once situated, you would have found a gun battery here more than 200 years ago with cannons defending the area. Even though it might actually look like these low walls might have been a part of the foundations of Nutter's Battery, these were actually put up by the Parks Department in the 1940s. The original gun battery has long since disappeared. And this is what the view would have looked like actually back in 1814. As you can see, much of the landscape was really quite barren at the time, which made for some really excellent viewpoints. And of course, that made it the perfect place to put up a watchtower or a fortress or something like that. All right, and moving on, we're going to head towards the western shore of the Harlem Mere, and then we'll go ahead and explore the North Woods. Now, from the high point of Nutter's Battery, from that hill, we're going to head right down these steps. And here we are at the western side of Harlem Mere. And note all the shoreline plantings here, making it look very idyllic and very, very natural. If we were standing on this very same spot about 45 years ago in the late 1970s, we would have been looking at a completely different scene back then. In the 1970s, as many of you know, trash really was piling up here. There was graffiti everywhere, and many of the plants and trees were in really, really terrible shape. It's really quite amazing to me just how much the park turned itself around since then, especially after 1980, when the Central Park Conservancy was established. Okay, and from the Harlemere area, we now make our way across the drive. We're actually going to go ahead and kind of follow this pathway over towards the west, which is actually on the northern edge of the park. This is actually going to be parallel to 110th Street. One of my favorite things about the north end of the park is that the closer you get to 110th Street, the more ginkgo trees you're going to see. Ginkgos are, of course, they can be found all throughout Central Park, but they're going to be concentrated in very large numbers along the park's northern border. Now, this is probably one of my favorite trees in all of Central Park because there's literally no other tree like it. Ginkgos are the last remaining species of its order, which first appeared almost 300 million years ago. As you can see, it's got these very, very distinctive fan-like leaves, and they're, of course, native to East Asia, where it's been celebrated and planted in monasteries for centuries. In fact, it's actually known as the official symbol of the city of Tokyo. Right, and moving on, and from here, we're going to cross the road and we're going to start exploring the North Woods. Now, after we cross the street, we come to a series of stairs. Whenever I take folks up these steps, they're always really quite surprised by how many of these staircases there really are here in the North End. Remember, the topography around here can be very, very, very hilly. Exploring this area can itself become quite a serious hike. Now, once we get to the top of the stairs, you might notice that the landscape all of a sudden turns into a wooded forest. I always really like to just kind of listen to my surroundings when I'm over here. It's really quite a big difference from just moments ago when we were standing near the city streets. It's a lot more quiet up here. Again, this is going to be another thing that really catches new visitors by surprise. It's really kind of hard to imagine an actual forest within New York City. Of course, lo and behold, here it is. In fact, we actually have 3 of these woodlands in Central Park alone. Now, the North Woods contains a mix of both native and non-native tree species, but they're all going to be planted in such a way that they kind of mimic what they would look like if they were to just freely grow out in the wild. Compare that to the more ornamental trees of the southern end of the park, like the American elms, which are going to be planted in these neat formal rows along busy promenades like the mall. Here we can actually see the leaves of the Sweetgum Tree, which is a relatively common tree in New York City parks. Sweetgum trees have been planted here in Central Park since the very beginning. And most likely, they were going to be a part of the New York City landscape well before the park's construction in 1857. All right, and just up the trail, we come to this masonry structure at the top of the hill. So this is going to be the Blockhouse. This, of course, is what we all came here to see. Now, this is going to be the oldest structure in all of Central Park. This was constructed as basically part of the defensive work system built back in 1814 during what's called the War of 1812. The Blockhouse is also the last surviving military structure here in the north end of the park. All the other forts like Fort Clinton, Nutter's Battery, and Fort Fish, they were all going to be demolished by the time that the park was created in 1857. Now, the building material that's used in many of the defenses up here in Upper Manhattan, they were going to be composed mostly of locally quarried stone, especially, of course, Manhattan schist, which, as we've seen, can be found pretty much all over the island. Here we actually have an up-close look at the stonework of the Blockhouse itself. And here's the view of the Blockhouse from the south side. So why don't we actually go ahead and take a peek right through this doorway. And we can see that it's actually abandoned with weeds growing and the roof missing. Now, in the early years of Central Park, the Blockhouse was actually open to the public, and it was used as an observation point. You can actually see all the way north towards the northern sections of Upper Manhattan. You can even see all the way north towards the Bronx. Now, at some point throughout the decades, the wooden roof collapsed, and by the later years of the 20th century, the Blockhouse fell into disuse. However, it still remains as kind of like a hidden gem deep in the woods, waiting to really surprise the avid explorer. And now let's head to the western side of the blockhouse, and let's go ahead and see what in this section. We stand on top of this rock outcrop, we get a view of the surrounding forest. Now, because of the trees blocking our line of sight, you can't really see much right now, but it's going to be a totally different story in the winter time. Now, here's that same spot from just a few months ago. At certain times of the year, the views can be really very, very, very astounding. And you can actually see much of Upper Manhattan from here. Even today, even in the midst of summer, if you look very carefully, if you can actually see just a little bit of Washington Heights from the top of this hill. Now, this is probably the only spot in all of Central Park where you can actually catch a glimpse of the George Washington Bridge, which is located several miles to the north. Now, with this very, very, very unstated view of from the blockhouse, I'm going to go ahead and end things off right over here. Now, I happen to actually really enjoyed walking with you all today towards the blockhouse. Just walking through the North Woods and Harlemere and kind of exploring the forts here can really give you a sense of what this area was really like before it was transformed into Manhattan's backyard. And with that, I thank you all for visiting the park with us today. Now, don't forget to check out our other programs as well. Our in-person tours are now officially back, and we have a few openings still available. So please make sure to go ahead and check out the chat section for more details. We do, of course, look forward to being back in the park. We're going to go ahead and keep the room open for any last final questions. But from the Central Park Conservancy, stay safe and be well. Have a good day, folks.